So what I'd like to do today is offer a paradigm um, of health to you guys. And I'm going to do this by drawing on kind of two sources. One source is um, a Swiss alchemist called Paracelsus, who is known as the father of toxicology. And he contributed a lot to the development of modern medicine. And Paracelsus, like most alchemists, spoke in quite a cryptic, kind of mysterious way. And so I'm going to draw on a couple of his quotations and draw on a couple of his nuggets of wisdom. And I'm going to use them as the basic frame for this video. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to then take this wisdom from, I think it's like the 15th century, 15th, 16th century wisdom, grounded in the Western alchemical Hermetic tradition. And I'm going to probably layer in a bit of context around that, around Paracelsus and why he might have been saying those things. But then what I want to do is I want to link that with the spirit of our times, the spirit of the modern age, the spirit of today here in 2020. And the way I'm going to do that is by talking about a principle called hormesis, I believe it's called. In medicine, hormesis, my basic understanding of hormesis, is the idea that stress or pain or basically a stressor to our system, a little bit of a stressor to our system, will help produce a kind of defensive response to that stressor, and that response will help us stay more healthy. Hormesis is best understood by the idea of immunization, the notion that if you want to become immune to a certain disease, a little bit of that disease being injected into your blood or into your system is going to help your immune system kind of combat that disease and become stronger in response to it. I'm not a doctor, haven't studied medicine, but that's my general understanding of the principle of what in the modern day we call hormesis. Cool. So I'm going to try and marry the kind of ancient wisdom, esoteric perspective to the kind of modern, data-driven, pragmatic perspective. And what I'd like you guys to get out of this by the end of it is a clear understanding of a paradigm for health, a paradigm for understanding what it means to be healthy. And I mean health physically, in the body, the health of the body. And I think primarily I'm going to talk about the health of the body in this video, but I also think that these principles apply to the health of the mind as well. But personally, I don't really see a particularly hard distinction between the body and the mind. I think they're just conceptual categories that we use that can be useful in analysis, but I don't know how real those categories are. The distinction between mind and body, I don't know how real that is. I think that oneness really is the ultimate truth, and that everything is connected, and therefore I don't know how much I want to belabor the point of body versus mind. So I'm going to talk about health. I'm going to offer a paradigm for health. So let's go to Paracelsus. Paracelsus, the Swiss alchemist. I'm just going to get up a quote of his and read it to you guys. This is quite a famous quote from Paracelsus. So Paracelsus said that poison is in everything, and no thing is without poison. The dose makes it either a poison or a remedy. Bit of a mysterious saying, bit of a cryptic saying there, Paracelsus. What do you mean? Well, let's go straight into linking it with hormesis. I'm going to talk about a few different things to ground out Paracelsus's wisdom in daily pragmatic reality, okay? Well, one thing I've already covered. I think it's immunology or the immunization or something like that. This ability we have in modern science to, if you go traveling to different areas, you will get a little bit of a disease injected into your system, a little bit of the disease. The dose maketh the poison, as Paracelsus says. So a little dose of it, and you'll get that into your system, and your system will be like, what is this? And then your system will produce a response. It will learn basically to adapt to that noxious stressor, and the stressor will come in, and then your immune system will go like that and basically adapt and learn and integrate that stressor, and therefore we become healthier. Therefore our system becomes more adaptive to stresses. That's one thing. Another thing is exercise. Really, just going really basic here. Exercise is a form of mild stressor, and the thing is that if we just exercised all the time, like lifted weights or ran or just used our body, used all of our energy all the time and exercised and exercised and exercised, eventually we would die. Like, it's a lot of energy, like, and we would become physically exhausted if we just did that all the time without stopping. We would, it would exhaust us ultimately if we just exercised 24/7 all the time without any rest. Now, again, this is Paracelsus's idea of the dose maketh the poison. So the dose, a small dose of exercise, a little and often, will again be a stressor to our system, and it will stress our system, and our system will produce an adaptive response. So whether that's an increased lung capacity, a more efficient cardiovascular system, more bigger muscles, like, the body responds to a small dose of stress. So we get it in immunology and we get it in exercise. Where else do we get this principle? At work. Fasting. Fasting is when we don't eat. That's what fasting is. And guess what would happen? Again, just highlighting the principle here, right? If you get injected with a little bit of a disease, that's healthy for you. But if you get injected with a lot of a disease, you will die or you'd get ill, okay? If you exercise, do a little bit of exercise, that's healthy for you. But if you do a lot of exercise, you would die. Fasting, not eating food. What happens if you took that on as a lifestyle and never ate food again? Well, you'd die. That would be bad for you. So again, this is Paracelsus's wisdom. This one principle, this one idea, ripples through multiple levels of reality. It echoes through, you could say. But yeah, fasting, not eating food, not a good thing if you play that out over as a absolute principle, because you'll just die. But if we've got science coming out supporting this at the moment, that if you do a little fast, little and often, 16-hour fast, 18-hour fast, over several days perhaps, or a little fast, that induces it stresses the metabolic system, metabolic stress. And again, I like doing my little diagram with the hands. You've got this little stressor, the fasting stressor, and then your metabolism goes, okay, I'm going to adapt to this. I'm going to adapt to this. I'm going to, basically the principle in health, as I understand it, is that you're awakening or activating or bringing online potentialities within your own physiology, within your own neurology, within the chemicals of your brain and your nervous system and your endocrine system and your different systems. You're awakening your biology, you're activating your biology proactively, voluntarily. You're saying, Give me a bit of that disease so I can respond better. Give me a bit of fasting so I can respond better. Give me a bit of exercise so I can respond better. The underlying principle is that you're voluntarily moving towards the stressor. You're actually activating your approach systems. So you're actually hunting down the stressor. You're moving towards the stressor. It's like if we were in our natural environment and we were in our campground, had the campfire, and there was the dark forest outside of our campfire. And the hunter or the hero of that tribe, of that society, is the one who goes in, who they hear the wolves howling at night, and everyone's like, oh no, the wolves are going to come and eat us. But the hero is the one who goes out into the forest to find the biggest, baddest wolf and to voluntarily confront the beast that lies in the darkness, right? And that's a heroic pattern of adaptation. And really what we're talking about with immunology, with exercise, with fasting, and I'm going to do some more just to show how deep this principle is this voluntarily, is a psychological pattern which is voluntarily approaching stressors. That was how I would sum up this principle: voluntarily approaching stressors. Here's another one. This is a psychological one: therapy, or shadow work, or self-reflection and meditation. Consciously and voluntarily evoking what Carl Jung would call our shadow. Those values, those ugly parts of our own psyche, those rejected values and experiences and traumas within us that we don't like to look at, we don't like to acknowledge. But if we do journal and make them clear, or do active imagination and dream work, or do breath work, or do exercise, or do fasting, or do all of these different retreats, not just retreats, but all these different therapeutic modalities, you could say, or typical Jungian or Freudian kind of talking therapy, these different therapeutic modalities. If we say, again, I voluntarily approach the stressor, then we embody the image of the hero. That's how Carl Jung would look at it. We incarnate, which means give a body to, we give a body to the information in the zeitgeist, in the spirit of the times, in the specifics of our lives. So we activate the archetype of the hero by voluntarily approaching a stressor in different domains at different levels of analysis. So let's just repeat Paracelsus, and I'm going to give you a few more layers of this truth, I suppose. Poison is in everything, and no thing is without poison. The dosage makes it either a poison or a remedy. How interesting is that? That's so fascinating. So it's so fascinating, because what he's saying is that really it's about our relationship to, or our attitude towards, stressors or pain, you could say. Pain or stressors. What's our relationship to the pain or the stressor? Is it an avoidant relationship? I don't want that. Okay. If you move away from the stressor, if you say, I don't want to get injected by a disease, well, that means that you're just going to be weaker and more susceptible to the disease. If you go, I don't want to exercise, that just means you're going to be weaker and more susceptible to different types of disease, and your muscles are going to be weaker, your cardiovascular system is going to be weaker, all of these things, and you'll basically become overcome at some point by the pain that you've rejected, you've avoided, will come and get you, basically. And so this is why the heroic pattern is necessary. So you either take an avoidant attitude towards stressors, call this a stressor, call this your ego's attitude towards it. It's a voluntary approach, or it's like kind of an avoidant attitude. It's basically a heroic or cowardly paradigm, basically. I don't know, paradigm, heroic or cowardly attitude. Um, cool. So where are we at? So you've got immunology, you've got exercise, you've got fasting, cold showers. You've got therapy, which is what I've mentioned. You've got cold showers, which is what I'm doing at the moment. If you look at a guy called Wim Hof, I really hope you've heard of him, and if you haven't, type in WIM space HOF into YouTube and go and explore that guy. Learn all about him, because that guy is embodying Paracelsus's wisdom. Really, he is. Because he's basically saying that exposure to the cold. Are you seeing the pattern now? If you go into the cold and you just go live in Antarctica naked, you will die. Well, Wim Hof's actually making me question that, but let's just say that if you do that, it's going to be very difficult for you to adapt to that. But again, noticing the pattern, if you get a small dose of that stressor, cold, and you have a cold shower and you voluntarily expose yourself to the stressor, you produce adaptations in your immune system, you activate your brown fat, which burns more energy. There's loads of biological stuff that goes on. You activate certain hormones, endocannabinoids and opioids, and adrenaline and like pain relief hormones. You change your neurochemistry. All these things get activated, right? All these potentials get activated. Why? Because you're voluntarily approaching the stressor. Exercise, cold exposure, fasting. Exercise, cold exposure, fasting. You've got like loads in that already. Like those three principles are, from my perspective and from what I've researched about health, if you go into YouTube and type in Rhonda Patrick, RHONDA space Patrick, PATRICK, go type her name in, go type in Wim Hof, go type in Rhonda Patrick, and research what she's saying. She's talking about saunas and how heat stress, again, if you go out into a desert and you go out into too much heat, that's not going to be good for you. If you go out into too much cold, that's not going to be good for you. But a little heat stress and a little cold stress often activates biological potentials. I can't remember the science that she goes into, but basically it's good for you. Heat stress, good for you, little and often. Cold stress, good for you, little and often. Exercise, good for you, little and often. Fasting, no nutritional input coming in. You activate the, I think it's the mTOR pathway, which is the anabolic pathway when you put in nutrition. That gets deactivated, and the AMP kinase pathway, I don't know the science as well. Go and research it. But like, there's real empirical evidence coming out across all of these topics to validate these ideas, and these are old principles. Like, as I have alluded to with Paracelsus, the dose maketh the poison. So a little bit of heat stress, little and often. Cold stress, little and often. Fasting, exercise, therapy. What else? I think I've covered a lot of it, right? Like, I mean, that's my general point. I mean, it's I think health is it's a funny thing to define. It's complex. I think there's a lot of different opinions and different perspectives and different paradigms when it comes to health. And so I think we can I think if we understand principles, as I think what Ralph Waldo Emerson said, as to methods, there are a million and then some. But principles, when it comes to principles, there are only a few, and this is a principle that I wanted to share with you guys today. And it's the principle of hormesis, or the dose maketh the poison, as Paracelsus would say. And I think it really applies at every level of analysis that I can think of. Like, even when you think of like intellectual development or learning, like look, the best thing to do is to voluntarily approach the stressor. Like if you don't know something, go and try, go and experiment, go and do a little kind of foray into that world, go and test something out, go and read a little book or acquaint yourself with some idea. And what that will do is it will make you more adaptive to that area of knowledge, you know, instead of just like running away from it, and then that thing's going to overcome you at some point in the future. Because really what it means to be a human being, from my perspective, is to be an adaptive entity. You know, that's, I think, what Stephen Hawking's defined like survival of the fittest as. He said, like, you know, the species that survives is not the strongest or the fastest species, it's the species that's most adaptable to change. And that's what I think human beings are fundamentally. I think that's why we have brains, and that's why we have the nervous system as complex as it is, you know, like, because we are adaptive. And what it means to be adaptive is to produce action pathways, you could say, to produce action pathways in response to data points in the environment. And we activate more potentials and more action pathways and more possibilities when we voluntarily expose ourselves to little bits of stimulus from different worlds, you know, whether it's fasting, nutritional stressor, whether it's cold stress, you know, an environmental stressor, whether it's, you know, exercise, you know, another environmental stressor, whether it's even information, you know, a new idea, a new perspective, a new way of looking at things. Okay, that's quite opposite from what I believe, but let me just introduce a little bit of that into my system, and then maybe I'll get a more holistic perspective, a more balanced perspective. So I think it even applies to our intellectual development too. And that's really what I think the markers of truth are. You know, I'm really concerned with truth and interested in truth. I love philosophy. It's just a big passion of mine. And so what I want to talk about in these videos is just truth. And hopefully what I'm sharing with you here is the truth. I mean, it's as far as close as I can get to the truth, at least. The dose maketh the poison. Paracelsus said, like, the dose maketh the poison. It's a good thing to remember, right? Because stressors are everywhere. Pain is everywhere. The point is that it's our relationship to pain. It's our attitude, our belief, our actions in relationship to pain. Is it a voluntary approach, or is it kind of a running away and avoidant? You either have approach systems activated or avoidant systems activated. And as Jordan Peterson has highlighted, to approach is to act like a predator, to be in control, to be dominant, and to be expansive. And to avoid is to act like a prey animal, to run away, to shrivel, to shrink, to contract our energy. And as human beings, I feel like we have got infinite potential, and that to grow and evolve, for our soul to really grow, evolve, to expand, we need to do expansive things. We need to think expansively and act expansively. And expansion really comes from moving towards things. And so move towards the cold shower, move towards the fast, move towards the exercise, move towards these things that scare you, that challenge you, that will be painful, that will be uncomfortable. I'm not denying that they're going to be painful, they're going to be uncomfortable, they're going to be chaotic and unknown, really. But that is the heroic pattern of adaptation. And really, if you consider yourself in the short term, they're going to be painful. Short term perspective, you're like, Sam, I'm not getting in a cold shower. Sam, I'm not fasting. Sam, I'm not doing any of these things. Like, what are you talking about? Because from a short-term perspective, from a short timeline, from a day or a week, it's just like a day, let's like go in the cold shower. No, I don't want to do that, it's painful. Cool. But like, you don't exist just in a day, you exist across a lifetime. And what I'm talking about is taking the lifetime's perspective of your health, which is, I think, the appropriate perspective to take when it comes to your health, and say, look, what's the optimal long-term pattern of adaptation? And I think the science is just clear. go check out Rhonda Patrick, go check out Wim Hof, go do your own research. I think the client science is evident about those things I've mentioned: exercise, fasting, cold exposure. The data's in. And then it links with this wisdom principle from Paracelsus, which I think wisdom is just simplified, like condensed information, right? And so the dose maketh the poison. The dose makes the poison. So like, yeah, they're poisons. Yeah, you're gonna think to me like, Sam, like cold exposure or like fasting, these are poisons. These are dangerous. These are like, they could kill me if I did them forever. Yes, they could. Yes, they are. Yes, they are dangerous. They're noxious stimuluses, stimuli. But a little and often, voluntarily, produces optimal adaptation across a lifetime. I think that's really true, and I think that is how we activate our potential. I think ridiculous amounts of potential can be activated through the channels that I've just talked about, as health principles, health practice, health methods. Go research the Wim Hof method, go research cold exposure, go research fasting, go research a principle called autophagy, which is when cells eat themselves and cleanse themselves of toxins when we fast. Go research exercise stuff, yeah, like, look, I just wanted to express that because I think that's true. And it's just stuff I've been researching over the last few years, all of this science and all of these practices and disciplines. And it just interests me so much that Paracelsus could just, well, did predict all of this and said it in this one concise wisdom principle, this statement: the dose makes the poison. And so hopefully that's a good paradigm for health for you guys. And would love to hear your comments, love to hear your perspectives on it. So yeah, I just wanted to share it with you. I realize I haven't really gone into Paracelsus or the alchemical tradition, but my final note on that, from an esoteric perspective, is that the alchemists were seeking the philosopher's stone, and what part of the myth of the philosopher's stone is that the one who possesses the philosopher's stone could achieve immortality, and this is highlighted in Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter film, where Nicholas Flamel, the famous alchemist, is a character. And anyway, what's my point? So the myth of immortality. Well, look, I don't know if immortality is possible. I don't know that it's not possible. I don't know. Like, I'm just open-minded in relationship to an idea like that. But the great dream of alchemy did have as one of its aims immortality. And Paracelsus is situated in the alchemical tradition. He was a practicing alchemist of the Middle Ages in Europe. And so he must have had this concern in mind when he said the dose maketh the poison. And if you look at the research, the contemporary research around hormesis, this principle is of great interest to people who are interested in aging research and what it means to preserve our youth and our vitality, and to stay optimally healthy really across a lifetime. And things like cold exposure, things like diet, of course, things like exercise and fasting, these things, not surprisingly, are coming up as pathways for sustained adaptation across a lifetime. Now, who knows whether immortality is possible? I know that, technology is advancing, and a lot of people in Silicon Valley and that kind of thing are looking into it. I don't know. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think the science is there yet, but I'm not close to the possibility that it's possible. I mean, lots of things have changed in the world as a result of creative activity, as the creative activity of humans, and who knows really what's possible. I certainly do not know what's possible. but the reason I kind of put that idea out there for you just at the end of the video is because that's really the dream of alchemy. That's one of the dreams of alchemy. The one who possesses the philosopher's stone possesses the elixir of life, the elixir vitae, the elixir of life that sustains life indefinitely and rejuvenates life indefinitely. And from my experience and the research and like my exposure to these different methods and techniques and stuff, like that is what these processes seem to do at a micro level. Hormetic exposure, like the exposure to small painful stimulus regularly, does produce adaptation and lengthen lifespan and increase health and decrease stress and increase immune response, you know. And I think all the biological markers are there to say that these principles are literally an elixir vitae. Whether they lead to immortality, who knows, but they certainly make us more healthy. And I think for all practical intents and purposes, that's good enough for me. That's at least closer to immortality, or closer to health, longevity, flourishing, and a well-lived life. So yeah, I was focusing really on physical health today, but also, as I mentioned, with therapy and with intellectual development, this principle applies to mental health too. Don't really recognize the distinction as hard as I've explained between mind and body, because I think it's all one system really. But yeah, like the idea is that the dose makes the poison, and that health and longevity and vitality are really sustained by small voluntary exposure to harmful stimulus, to painful stimuli across a lifetime. That's the wisdom of Paracelsus. Thank you so much for listening. Would love to hear your comments. Would love to hear your perspectives. If you enjoyed the vid, click subscribe below. Yeah, thanks again.